destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Free Fall. Hi everyone, this is Andy Steele. I'm happy to be back for another episode. We got a great one ahead of us. We're going to be having a panel discussion amongst 3 of our former guests about a host of various issues related to 9/11 truth. And, of course, we had a great discussion with author Sander Hicks last week about his latest book, Slingshot to the Juggernaut. If you go to our archives at 911freefall.com, you can listen to that interview, as well as you can click the link to Amazon.com's page for that book where you can buy it. And you can also listen to now over 30 hours worth of interviews with various activists and scientists who are dedicating at least a part of their lives to the cause of undoing 11 years of deception and exposing 9/11 for the crime that it was, not the fabricated justification for the U.S. government war of terror that it was sold to us as. Now, if you've never heard this show before, we talk about 9/11 science and 9/11 activism, and we shine a light on individuals doing what they can to expose the fact that the Twin Towers and Building 7 were brought down in a controlled demolition on 9/11. Now, the scientifically proven reality is nagging at the public conscious, and it will not go away simply because people wish it away or because it's too scary to face, folks. All right? The ramification of 9/11, they're still being felt. All right? And the lie of the government's official story is not staying contained in the memory box of that day, okay? It's spreading like a malignant tumor to overtake all our civil liberties here at home, and it's infecting our foreign policy now as our government continues to declare war on the rest of the world. All right, so that's why a show like this, which is constantly revisiting that day 11 years ago and unapologetically pointing out the truth of what really happened, that's why a show like this is necessary, is needed, and it will continue. And justice will only come when we reveal and we prosecute the perpetrators of this crime. And I think it can happen. And more importantly, I think the perpetrators of that crime know this too. And that's why they're afraid of you out there listening to my voice right now. They are afraid of you waking up and finding out not only what they did, but the fact that you have power to undo it and put them where they should be. Now, a group we always talk about that is doing the work of undoing the lie is, of course, architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. All right, AE 9/11 Truth is a nonprofit organization currently representing over 1,700 verified architects and engineers who are calling for a real investigation into what brought down Towers 1, 2, and 7 on 9/11. And, of course, as well as thousands of other people who are demanding the same thing. And I am one of them. And while this program, 9/11 Freefall, is independent and it does not speak for AE 9/11 Truth, we do proudly stand with that organization and do everything we can to let our audience know about it and what they can do to help in its mission for the American people. All right, so if you go to AE911truth.org, you'll see there are a ton of volunteer teams for you to join. You can just assess yourself and first and decide, what are you good at, all right? And then once you know that, you can find a team where your talents will fit best. Ladies and gentlemen, whatever you can offer is needed in this critical information war, even if it's your own 2 cents on how to do a project better or suggestions on how to better carry out the mission. All right, the only way you lose is if you don't fight. And even if you don't have time to volunteer with an organization or you're a loner and want to run solo, the smallest actions every day that you do every day further this cause in huge ways. All right, even if you're just forwarding Richard Gage's letter to police chiefs and sheriffs, available at AE911truth.org that went out a few weeks ago, to your local police station, or if you write an editorial to your local newspaper, or even if you just stand out in front of your local mall with a sign saying AE911truth.org. It's like firing a metaphorical munition at the lie, and you will stand as a Minuteman in the real battle for American freedom here in the 21st century. All right, so you need to go to AE911truth.org and see there what you can do to help out. I want to remind our audience also that the show is interactive and that we do want to hear from you. You can contact us in 2 ways. First, you can call us. The phone number is 315-982-6663. That is 315-WTC-6663. Or you can write to us at freefall911truth@gmail.com. Again, that's freefall911truth@gmail.com. All right, maybe you have a show idea, or maybe you have a guest that you want us to interview, or maybe a suggestion on how to improve the show, or maybe you want to say something that we can play here on the air. If it's feasible, we will put it on. And I also want to quickly tell our audience about a great film that's called Operation Terror that I finally had the chance to watch last week. We're working on getting Art Olivier, the writer, who's the writer of the movie, onto this show to talk about it. He's currently in Iran attending a conference on Hollywoodism and Hollywood's role in imposing imperialistic views on the people of the world, and former Senator Mike Gravel is there too as well. But apparently Operation Terror is banned from several theaters, and that's because it's a dramatic film that portrays 9/11 how it actually was. All right? From the perspective of it being an inside job that was planned by the highest levels of the official and unofficial government, compartmentalizing different aspects of the plot so that most of the participants don't even know what they are a part of. And it's a really good movie, and it's amazing how many people around me it is actually drawing in, all right? And I'm talking about people who don't take much of an interest in topics like 9/11 truth to begin with, are asking me for copies of it to show to their own friends. And in our modern day, there are a lot of people who are more intrigued by something that dramatizes events rather than listening to somebody speak at a lecture about those same events. And that's just the situation we're in, all right? And this film does a great job of filling that role. Better than I even expected, actually. So this is my first of many plugs of that movie. And like I said, I am working on getting the writer of that movie on here to talk more about it when he comes back to the United States. But in the meantime, if you go to OperationTerror.com, and that's spelled just the way it sounds, you can watch a trailer for it. You can also get some background info on the movie, and you can also purchase the DVD there. And this is one that if you show it to a friend, it will definitely wake them up one way or another, especially if they've never been exposed to this topic before. All right? It's a completely different take, and for them it will be scary. And even for someone who is aware of the evidence of controlled demolition on 9/11 and other aspects of the 9/11 crime like I've been for years, it's scary to see it actually played out and to see the hypothetical conversations behind the scenes. And I'm not going to give anything away about it. You can watch it for yourself. But obviously, since 9/11 is a historical event, we know what happened that morning. But to see, for instance, a character make that decision to bring the towers down is breathtaking, because even though at this point we don't know what was actually said behind the scenes in that moment, you know, seeing even a fictional portrayal of that brings it home, because you know something like that conversation had to happen. All right. So again, it's OperationTerror.com. Buy a copy of it and try to screen it somewhere. All right. A local library is a great place, because I don't think they can deny you if you make the request for a room there. All right. Just sign out the projector in the room, pay the $10 or whatever to put an ad in the newspaper that you're showing it, and see who comes. All right, you might meet some like-minded folks and form a group from that encounter. Or you may have a cultural center in your area, like a museum. You can submit it there for a screening. All right, even if they don't screen it, you might plant a seed in the mind of the middleman who's telling you no. It doesn't matter. Just getting the word out that the film exists helps out, and it's all about waking up your fellow man. So again, OperationTerror.com, check it out, get the DVD, spread the word. Okay, now before we get to our guests this week, what we're going to do is what we do every week. We're going to take about 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families, and of course everybody who has died in the wars that followed 9/11. So we're going to do those 10 seconds right now. Okay, and that is 10 seconds. And folks, of course, we always remind you every week at this time why we take those 10 seconds of silence and what this movement is really about. All right, it's about facing facts and not letting reality be altered or shaped by our government and our corporate media to fit into a particular geopolitical agenda. Now, we all witnessed that crime that day, and we've been victims of it ever since. There are laws of the universe and laws of physics that don't change just because somebody in a suit and a tie on TV is paid to pretend they don't exist. All right, and when they say the truth will set us free, that's not only going to set us free from the post-9/11 world, but from any future God wannabes who want to challenge the will of man to be free and to openly question and to know what reality is and what is a lie. All right, so we're going to just jump right in right now because we got some great guests on, and they've been on here in the past too, and it's the first on the show what we're doing. We're going to have a panel discussion among the various outspoken activists of AE 9/11 Truth who, like I said, have appeared here in the past. Now, our first guest is Pam Senzee. She is a mother, artist, and a longtime 9/11 Truth activist, and she pretty much had an idea of what 9/11 was really about right from the very day it happened. And last year, she and Rena Patty biked across America in the Journey for Truth, talking to countless numbers of people, along their way and spreading AE 9/11 Truth's information. So you can check out the blog she kept of that journey at journeyfortruth.org. She's also been involved in outreach to federal and local law enforcement regarding the controlled demolition evidence. Welcome, Pam.
Oh, thank you. Very happy to be here, Andy, and hi to your guests as well.
And our second guest is Dave Slesinger. Dave is a longtime activist for various issues, including 9/11 Truth. He is the webmaster at JenningsMystery.com, which brings attention to Barry Jennings, who witnessed explosions in Building 7 on the morning of 9/11, and went public with this information before he suddenly died. Dave is the public outreach team leader at AE 9/11 Truth. Welcome, Dave.
Well, thanks for having me. We really appreciate it.
And finally, we have Rick Shaddock. Rick is the webmaster at a number of 9/11 Truth-related websites, including chemical engineer Mark Basils. He made a number of scientific videos about 9/11 controlled demolition evidence, as well as videos shining a light on other aspects of the 9/11 crime. His website is shaddockresearch.org. Welcome, Rick.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, now the first thing I'm going to throw out to you guys is, and we can, as a topic I think is very important. Weeks ago, rapper Lupe Fiasco got yanked off the stage at an Obama inauguration concert because he rapped a song that had various controversial lyrics in them, including lyrics about Building 7. As well, there was a Belgian parliament person who said some very bold things about Western foreign policy, including 9/11 being a fabricated event. Now, there's been hardly any mention of this in the quote-unquote mainstream press, and despite some gains, we are still facing a huge corporate media blackout of this topic of 9/11 Truth. Now, the question I want to ask is, taking all of this into account, do you feel that we are moving fast enough as a movement? Now, we'll start with Pam.
Well, I think that we're, and also we want to mention Ferdinando Impastimato, the honorary president of the Supreme Court of Italy, who has recommended that 9/11 be investigated by the International Criminal Court, and he's used AE 9/11 Truth evidence in the case that he's trying to bring forth, which I think is outstanding, absolutely outstanding. He wrote a letter, and let's see, the end of his letter says, the only possibility for achieving justice is to submit the best evidence concerning the involvement of specific individuals in 9/11 to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court and ask him to investigate according to the Articles 12, 13, 15, 17, letters A and B of the statute of the International Criminal Court, recalling also the preamble of the statute. And anyone can read the link to that letter from AE 9/11 Truth, and just put in the search his name or Impastimato, and you should be able to pull up an article about him and link to the letter there.
You're right, and hardly any mention of that, and so despite this what should be earth-shaking news coming from overseas and even from here in the United States, they're
right.
still not mentioning it. So the question is, and I'll throw this out to you, Rick, right now. Do you think we're moving fast enough, though?
No, we need more scientific research. Through the window of science, we see an age of enlightenment regarding 9/11. And having more studies in peer-reviewed journals will provide more evidence for the International Criminal Court to make accusations, arrests, and prosecutions. So the study being supervised by Mark Steele that we're doing a fundraiser for will help to do that. We'll need more studies after that. on the various aspects of 9/11 to help get the scientific community on board. Many times, lawmakers will look to the scientists to help them decide what is the highest priority. And if there are studies published in independent scientific research journals, it'll be very hard for the mainstream media to ignore them.
Now, do you? We've got science, and obviously we need to do more research and keep going and not stop. But we've got science. We've got some pretty big things that we've already uncovered, things that should be at least mentioned in the news. And the only time it's mentioned is that we are is when they're trying to attack us and put up straw man arguments and hit pieces. Do you think this? And I'm going to throw this out to anybody that just wants to jump in and answer. Do you think the science alone is going to get through this wall that we're facing and that's blocking us from the public that we're trying to wake up?
I'll say yes.
Go ahead, Dave.
The issue is not is the corporate media moving fast enough. The corporate media is dedicated to lying. When there are breakthroughs, it's unusual. It can happen, but the issue is not that. The issue is, are we using all of our means to get the word out? We obviously have been doing something right, because 10 years ago, people were incredibly nasty when you tried to discuss it. The average citizen was incredibly nasty. And now most people are completely reasonable. And I'm very rare to get people to be nasty. So something has been going right. And it certainly hasn't been the corporate media. And what we need to do is to be clear about the various means of doing outreach and develop them properly. Most truth sympathizers dislike being activists. The three of us are activists, and you're an activist, Andy, but generally, the estimate I made, half a year ago, was that the percentage of activists percentage of people who agree with AE 9/11 Truth who are active is maybe 1 in 10,000. Most people who agree with us would rather commiserate with other people who agree with them, so they don't have to talk to anybody they don't agree with. And this is terrible. It's terrible. We need to do everyday grassroots outreach, one-on-one, one-on-three, etc. And so the question is not, is the corporate media moving fast enough? Well, they're moving in the wrong direction for a reason. Are we moving fast enough in the means that we have available to us? And we're not, because most of us don't like activism. They got burnt 5 years ago or whenever when they tried to do some activism, and either the public was nasty to them, and so they're licking their wounds, or they became active with A&E, and they actually were on a call, and people disagreed with each other, and they're just not going to tolerate that. Well, that's how politics is. People disagree with each other. If you can't stomach being on a call where people disagree with each other, then you don't have a right to expect to live under freedom. Adults disagree, and you have to put up with it.
Well said. Now, Pam, you wanted to express a thought on this?
Yes, well, and now let me just comment on what David has said. And yes, I agree that years ago people were extremely rude and combative when you talked about this subject. When Rena and I went across the country, we had an overwhelmingly positive and respectful and responsive response from the people that we spoke to, and some of them were police chiefs and fire chiefs and students, professors. So people are receptive, but I think that, and especially when it's presented as science and evidence, and you're not presenting conspiracy theories, that tends to turn people off. They are receptive to science and evidence, which AE produces Now, the issue of activity is really crucial, and I appreciate what David put forth here, because that's the problem, and that's the biggest problem. People who know about it must become active. And I think that one of the keys is for people to, in order for people to be proactive and to sustain activity, to sustain activism, is to have a positive attitude, to have a solution-oriented attitude. And we have to instill that synergy in others, we as activists, and put forth, cast light on the positive and what we're doing and what we can do and what's being done, because people tend to get negative if you're only focusing on the negative and you're only focusing on how big it is and you're only focusing on what a big flipping problem this is. People, they just feel overwhelmed and they shut down. And so I think it's our responsibility as activists to encourage people along. That's how we're going to build a larger activist movement. And by the way, I'm one of the team leaders for AE 9/11 Truth Action Group team, and I would very much like to people listening, for them to go to Take Action on the AE 9/11 Truth website and start action groups. Contact me, become local contacts, start action groups. I can help you. I can help you connect with others in your community, because people who are AE supporters aren't necessarily connected to other AE supporters, and that's important as well. We who are already on the front lines and doing things, it's our responsibility to encourage others and help them along and build this ourselves too, because there are people out there who just aren't natural activists, and they don't know what to do. And life is problematic. They're dealing with a lot, so it just becomes something that, that just gets backburnered in their lives.
That is, I agree with you guys completely, and just something I've noticed in myself really quick is that, years ago when I first started this, I would get attacked and people would be nasty, but my reaction isn't to retreat. I just kind of got nasty back, and it served a purpose at the time. But there comes a point as people become more accepting that we as activists have to become more accepting as well. And so, given the gravity of this situation, I can understand when people wake up, they're very fiery, they're very, it's so obvious, you don't understand how other people can't see this, but we have to, when I started looking at people who attack us or people who, are afraid of this, when I started looking at them as victims of this attack too, my perspective changed, my attitude changed, and I also noticed that the reaction to me, reaction of people to me changed as well. So that's just something I wanted to throw on top of your sentiments too, is that you're absolutely right, and we have to be mature and understand, it is big, but that doesn't mean that we have to shrink in the shadow of this and become worse people or lesser people.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say one more thing, is keep in mind, because you're talking about your anger, how much anger you had in the beginning, and I did as well, and I'm sure all of us, we go through that. We go through those 5 stages of grief. We've lost so much, and once you realize what this is, you're going to go through a lot of emotional vicissitudes, and it's important to recognize that others are going through those too, and they may not be at the same stage that you're at. You've kind of worked through some stuff, and now you're working with others and trying to get them on board. Well, they haven't completed some of those processes, so it's something to be aware of, I think.
Now, something that we've talked about is loss of civil liberties, and this was written. You contributed this part, Pam, to the letter that went out to police chiefs and sheriffs across America. The mentioning of the NDAA, and then and how the fundamentals of our Constitution and due process are under threat because of this 9/11 official lie. Now, given the busyness of our society and the fact that we've got a failing economy and there's the needs of everyday life that forces people, to have very little time to focus on anything outside of their own sphere of existence, and of course the short attention span of our modern public, do you guys think that the loss of civil liberties is enough to motivate people to stand for 9/11 Truth or even to look into it?
becomes a motivator when people start to see their constitutional rights being eroded and start to become active. And we're seeing some students coming forth, and I think the students are going to be a major help in getting 9/11 truth out and to get it discussed on college campuses. Because 9/11 hits so many areas of society that it could be a topic of discussion in many classes. For example, in physics, you'd be discussing how the laws of physics were violated on 9/11. Or in architecture classes, and the construction of buildings, engineering classes. They could be discussing how strange it is that the World Trade Center towers came down, or in sociology classes on the effect of the shock on the public, or in law school classes, how the legal procedures were bypassed regarding the maintenance of evidence of a crime scene after 9/11. And the students of today are the leaders of tomorrow, who may well be those who are elected in Congress and the Senate, who will actually get official U.S. investigation of 9/11. There's a college outreach program affiliated with the architects and engineers. The 9/11 Truth are being supported. They have their own website, students911truth.org.
That's right, and we had Steve Cohn and Mike Figa on, I think it was a month ago, to talk about the college outreach efforts, and I agree with you completely, Rick. Did you have anything to say, Dave or Pam?
I do.
Go ahead.
I think the main value of the problem of the loss of civil liberties is that it unites right and left, which is one of the more interesting and impressive aspects of the 9/11 Truth movement. It has people from both right and left in it. I can't think of another grassroots movement in history that is true of. I generally don't think that the loss of civil liberties is sufficient, because most people are not activists and they don't care about their freedom to say what they want to say because they don't exercise that freedom. But the fact that right and left end up working together is very impressive, and it's a positive thing.
Absolutely, and I second that, and it's amazing how many people that it's brought together, and that shows just how unifying this issue is, because it's true, because they really did blow up those buildings with all those people inside, and we all have humanity regardless of where you stand politically. Most people are good people deep down. That transcends politics, and they know that that's wrong, that that's evil, and it doesn't matter who was president then or who is president now. The truth needs to be exposed. We have to get justice for the victims and for the people who lost their loved ones on that day, and so that brings us all together. Now, go ahead.
I want to comment on this question before we move on. I think that the people don't really know that they've lost so much. I think that's part of the problem, because I think a lot is veiled from the public, and I think that people have a tendency to believe that they can trust the media. They're supposed to. We're supposed to have a free press, but we have a corporate media, which is in bed with the military-industrial complex. And when I was a kid, I think it was owned by 35 different companies that own the media, and now it's down to something like 5 or 6. So there's a huge monopoly, and their interest is not in reporting certain things, or at least not at great length or with some sort of comfortable spin. A lot of these losses of liberty that we have tend to be wrapped in a presentation package of terrorism. So that automatically, and I think even chemically in people's brains, it says, well, that's not for me. I don't have to worry about that because it's really for the terrorists. And the problem with that, for instance, is with the National Defense Authorization Act that Obama signed on December 31st, 2011, New Year's Day, which made it legal to arrest and detain Americans without charge, without a lawyer, without habeas corpus, no due process of law. People can be disappeared and put in secret prisons. Anyone in the world, the world has been declared a battleground. Anyone in the world can be spirited away in this way, and now it includes Americans. And Chris Hedges, Noam Chomsky, and others took this to court, and the Obama administration fought vigorously, and they currently have a stay. So, it was overturned and ruled unconstitutional, but they've asked for a stay. They got it, so it is currently legal. And we don't know what's going to happen. But see, the language is so loose. The judge asked the prosecutors, can this law apply to these defendants, these plaintiffs who were these journalists? And they wouldn't answer. And so, therefore, yes, indeed, it did apply to them. So the language is very loose, and it can apply to anyone. And this is what Americans don't understand. So that's, I think, part of our job as activists is to inform them about these kinds of things as well.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, and this goes into kind of our next question here. And I stated this on other shows about. There are a lot of issues, people protest now, all right? Various different factions who are out there protesting the issue that's most important to them. And a lot of these issues have either spun off directly or indirectly from the attack on 9/11, or these issues can at least be assisted by also demanding a real investigation into 9/11. Now, we at AE 9/11 Truth have done outreach with groups like there's been some Second Amendment advocate organizations outreach to. The Occupy movement. Now, how much do you guys feel we have in common with other groups? Not just the ones I mentioned, but just other groups out there protesting, like the civil libertarians and the like. And do you think 9/11 Science Truth can easily be wed to these other issues?
Well, I'll say that AE 9/11 Truth is very careful about. Being clear about its mission to disseminate for new investigation and to disseminate this hard science and forensic evidence. Individuals can go to other events. We went to Occupy Phoenix a number of times and tabled there. That sort of thing. I think we need to be extremely careful that we're making sure, because we have a code that involves nonviolence and abiding by laws and things like that. So, I think individuals can go to various events as activists and bring AE material and educate people, really, just about anywhere that's in line with our code of behavior and conduct. Then, yes, absolutely.
Well, it's funny, too, and, the reason I asked this, and I know we've got varying opinions on gun control and things like that, but, I live right here at ground zero of the gun control debate here in New York State, and I was at an Oath Keepers meeting earlier in the week, and they had people there at this thing talking about various other topics that they found a relation to the gun control issue, like certain agendas of government and things like that. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, these people, they don't trust government, and obviously they find themselves now in the crosshairs of another agenda. How great would it be if they were talking about 9/11 Science Truth at this event? And it's not even that AE 9/11 Truth itself needs to endorse Oath Keepers or any kind of stance on gun control or anything like that. But I was thinking, what if this guy, instead of talking about Agenda 21, he was showing a video of Building 7 to this room full of 60 people?
Yeah, I think that's good. What we're doing is weaving a networking with other people, a net to capture the perpetrators from all different angles, and those who who suspect that the government is not always telling the truth are people that we would naturally network with to help grow the number of people who question the official story of 9/11. So I think that's great. Probably on the official level, that seems that architects and engineers is doing the right approach of just sticking to one topic if they can. That Building 7 is the most glaring example of controlled demolition. Focusing on that, getting research behind that, and that will have a major impact on opening the eyes and the minds of American people. But absolutely, we should reach out to other people who may have similar interests, and that we get something from them and they get something from us. It was very encouraging, actually, that there was so much skepticism about the recent Sandy Hook incident, and I haven't really had time to study that in detail, but I think it's healthy that people do insist on seeing more evidence. So the fact that people are starting to ask these questions is very encouraging. That the American people are not as gullible as they used to, and not as willing to just sit back and accept a story being given us by the mainstream media.
Absolutely, and regardless of what anyone's opinion is on any particular subject like that, I think it's good that people are more vigilant, because asking the questions, I don't see it as hurting anything. It's called asking reasonable questions, and it was the absence or the attack of people asking reasonable questions that really woke me up to the topic of 9/11. Now, something that I always hear about, and something that people always ask me is, okay, well, who did it? Okay, and AE 9/11 Truth doesn't get into blaming anyone. But, the question I want to raise to the group here is, should a certain amount of research by the 9/11 science community be dedicated to the detective work of finding out who perpetrated the crimes? And when I say that, what I mean is this. People outside AE, they point fingers at the Bush administration, but members of the Bush administration likely didn't do the actual legwork of rigging the buildings with explosives. Okay? So should we focus more work on who was responsible for the controlled demolitions of the buildings, and do you think it's even possible to find that out? Well, Dave and then Rick.
Yeah, I have no doubt that science can be used for that purpose, and that can be done outside the bounds of architects and engineers, but I think that's not so important as actually deciding that we're going to do genuine grassroots activism around the simplest arguments. The simple argument I like to present, I've just learned about it within the past year, is the top of a building cannot crush the bottom of a building without slowing down. Now, I would say instead of developing more facts to present, it's better for us to boil down what we have to make the argument simpler for people who are in denial. That is ninth grade science. Most of the peace movement is college degrees, and they're refusing to look at a course that they probably passed. And so I don't see real value in trying to circumvent the need for a real investigation. I think it's good that we need a real investigation so that when we ask for it and they don't give it, they're the ones who are unreasonable. Now, of course, it will be difficult to get a real investigation. It could be that we're going to have to get a world investigation or a European investigation or a Canadian investigation or, such, or maybe a state investigation before we can get a federal with subpoena investigation. But my position to the folks who do the various alternative theories and who want to point fingers is that they're making it less likely that we're going to maintain our freedom. We're going to be more likely that that's going to result in excuses for people to not look at the simple evidence that we're trying to present. because they're going to say, well, you just have an axe to grind because you point the finger at these folks, and I happen to like these folks, so therefore you don't know the difference between evidence and speculation. And so we don't need this new evidence. What we need is for people to decide they're going to be activists.
Absolutely. And you had something to say, Rick?
Well, as far as tying into other groups and interests for truth, the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy is coming up next year, so there'll be more and more public awareness about that. And if people realize that the government has lied about John F. Kennedy, they may lie about 9/11 and other things. There are also the movies that are out, and one that's coming out, Operation Terror, and you've seen that video, and that'll help reach many people and get them to question 9/11. The national consciousness is rising, and there's meditation groups who are working to raise national consciousness, the ability of people to be aware of their environment. They're eating better foods and being aware of the difference between organic foods and those that have GMOs in them. There are efforts to reduce or eliminate fluoride from the drinking water, aspartame in foods, and all these things are helping America wake up and not be so gullible.
Well, you're absolutely right. More people are waking up, and that's why I feel good, even if it never happens in my lifetime, that we get a real investigation and an acknowledgement of what we actually witnessed that morning. And even if we don't get that, even though I think we will, what I feel good about is that we're making it harder for the bad guys, quote unquote, to pull off another thing. Okay, because people are awake, people are watching them. They got their people, we got our people all over the world watching them, and who know what they are and know what they're doing. So we're saving lives as we go. Now, you mentioned this, Dave, and you talked about our end game, and this leads into my next question. We always call for a new investigation of what brought the buildings down, but what does that look like? Now, Dave, you listed some different options, in terms of a world court or a international tribunal, things like that. And I'm going to ask our other two guests as well, and you, Dave, you can talk about this too, but how do we get one? Given the corrupt, apathetic nature of our puppet politicians and our legal system, how do we go about getting that as citizen activists who are trapped in this system and having to fight against that?
I have a very specific proposal. Dave Slesinger here. I think that any event of more than 100,000 people should be leafleted by local truth activists. We should be able to generate a leaflet, a 4-door page, where it end up costing 2 cents per leaflet. And there are probably 1,000 events at large in this country every year. I don't know, maybe it's 5,000, but it's, and it will take us years before we can get, because Boston leaflets for the 4th of July. We should be leafleting every 4th of July event, and we should be leafleting every county and state fair. And, people are used to leafleting means you go out on the corner with a dribble of people walking by and it's boring. We need to leaflet the large events, and we need to get ESO on every cable access station and every PBS. And we have to, it's public outreach which will solve this. The politicians are stinking cowards, but if they're afraid they're going to lose, we may need 75% majority. The Kennedy assassination, our side has 80%. 80% believe the Warren Commission is a lie. We may need 80% before we can save our freedom, but, it would be more reasonable if we only needed 55 or 60, but we may need 80%, and we need to have people go out and leaflet and not even end up having a conversation with people because there's a million people walking by really fast. But we need to do these big events, and we need to put our shows on cable access and PBS.
Absolutely.
In a way, we use the electronic leafleting through the internet. being active on blogs or Wikipedia and the James Randi forum, and just keep a presence there and let the people know that we're not going away. And that actually could reach many more people than physically possible, I think.
Well, what I always believe in is that if you reach out and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just wanted to throw in there, I'm always an advocate of actually talking to somebody, even more so as I get older, because I don't know, I just find that it's harder for people to ignore me if they're actually talking to me. Not saying it can't happen, but it's a lot more difficult for them to do that. But you're right, Rick. I mean, the great thing about our modern day is that we can reach out. The fact that we have all come together, that would have never happened 20 years ago, in my opinion, because I wouldn't have even known about this topic had it not been for the internet and people spreading it around. But what's interesting to me is I had Sandra Hicks on last week, and what surprised me in an answer that he gave, and to give some background to the audience and to you guys, a couple of years ago at the Treason in America conference, he was talking about an approach to serve government officials with a misprision of treason statement, which basically says that if you're aware of treasonous activities and you don't report it to the president, you're guilty of misprision of treason. And Sanders said that he doesn't really believe in the judicial approach anymore, that it's not possible. And so, in my opinion, it's like if you can't go through the courts, you can't go through some kind of legal framework, then how do you ever hope to accomplish a complete exposure of the story to some kind of satisfaction that results in us being vindicated and us stopping everything that 9/11 created, bringing it to a halt, the kind of a victory that we are seeking?
It may have to be international. It may have to be the International Criminal Court. I mean, I would hope that that's one day possible. It certainly is. It certainly would be apropos. I do know, I read an article by a professor, I think she was from NYU, and she was originally from Africa, and she wrote a very wonderful article years ago about the Bush administration, about Bush and the Bush doctrine, and she stated in that article, I've since tried to find it, and I've not been able to find it again, but she stated that Bush had written down, I don't know if it was a signing statement or something, that if the International Criminal Court tried to try any American for war crimes, basically that we would go and bomb The Hague. So it's kind of crazy. I don't know where that statement stands now with the Obama administration or whatever. We're in a very difficult situation. But regardless of that, education is crucial. Educating people is crucial because there are many better minds than ours. Present company excluded, but there's some great people out there who once they recognize what the problem is, and they're people of influence, we just have to keep putting the word out. But I want to go back to your previous question about investigating outside of the perimeters of the AE. For instance, who could have planted the explosives and what company could have been involved, and et cetera, et cetera. Kevin Ryan has done exhaustive research in that area. And I would suggest to anybody, go to Kevin Ryan's blog, dig within, and research his work. He's the Underwriters Laboratory Scientist that was a whistleblower when they were working with NIST. And so he was fired from his job for blowing the whistle and saying, hey, something's not right here. He is writing a book, and it's going to be incredible because he is just, I think of him as the preeminent investigative researcher on this subject. And actually I just got a message back from him, Andy, and he's interested in being on your show in a couple months to, if he gets his book done, to put his book. America.
Absolutely. We'd love to have Kevin Ryan. That's a great suggestion, Pam.
Yeah.
Now, something I want to make sure I get this question in and that I have everybody answer it before we end the show today is, it's a very simple question. All right. And I want our audience to think about this and ask themselves this too. All right. Do you think America can survive if we don't expose in 9/11 for the crime that it really was? We'll start with Dave.
Well, I don't think that's a fair way to put it. How you're defining America, I mean, I think what you're really asking is, will we lose the parts of our society that are worth having if we don't expose 9/11? And that's closer to a yes from me. I mean, I'm, for instance, a climate change activist. And the issue is, I mean, it's not that the world will end, it's that a huge percentage of people will die. And there will still be millions still alive. It's not that the world will end. So in this case, yes, America will survive, but it'll be a police state. Or it'll be, it'll be a terrible situation. The issue is, how much freedom will we lose if we don't do something about this? And that is a probably better way to ask that question. And I certainly think that if we don't address the ridiculous lies that the government is putting forward and the deceptions they're doing, then we certainly will lose our freedom.
Absolutely, and I like Dave's way of asking it better, so I'm refining it, and I'm turning to you, Pam.
Okay, well, I think that right now what we have is not America, in my view, because we don't have due process of law. As long as we have the NDAA, the offending section of NDAA, indefinite detention, as long as we have the Patriot Act and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights cannot coexist. It's impossible. The Patriot Act subverts those. And to me, America, that is what America is. America is the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And if we have these draconian laws, and they cannot coexist with those, then we don't have America, we have something else. We have something masquerading as America. So in my view, right now, the question is, how do we wholly restore America? That's where I'm at in my view on that question.
And what do you have to say, Rick?
I agree. To return America to the land of the free and the home of the brave, we need to throw off this corruption and police state tendencies that are creeping in, especially with the improvements in technology that allow more and more surveillance. Get back to the Constitution and be a force for freedom and peace for the entire world. And we be active and keep doing what we can, writing our congressmen. I also put an ad every week in the local newspaper. It's about $5, and just reaching people here and there, and giving out DVDs and helping websites and be active in blogging, and we can help to make remind America that we're already invincible. We don't need this huge military, which just profits the weapon makers, and basically restore our roots, get back to the basics in the Constitution and the ideas that the Founding Fathers had. The Second Amendment is a good one. But no country can take over another country if there are guns in every home. So Switzerland is a very good example of that. They learn to shoot, and they have access to guns in the home, so we don't need such a huge, what's called defense. Offense, putting troops all over the world is as much about defense as it is about offense and imperialism. So what we're doing is huge, and 9/11 was the most glaring symptom that America's gotten off track, and we need to get back to the Constitution and restore our country to what it should be.
I agree with you, and in our last minute, I'm just going to add my own opinion. as the final thought. Folks, I've seen the end result of this. I lived in Uzbekistan for a year and a half in the Peace Corps, and I've seen the end result of when a society falls apart and when it's living in tyranny. And it's not, it's not like a Ming the Merciless or some kind of cartoon. I mean, people still live their daily lives, but it's their voices hushing to a whisper when they mention anything political. It's people, it's local governments being afraid of a teacher starting a youth group, that the youth group might be doing the job better of taking care of things around town than the local government would, so it becomes a forbidden thing. Okay, it's people, increases in alcoholism because they just can't be allowed to get on with their lives because society's degenerated to so much that they can't run their business. So I've seen the end result of this. And I used to always kind of proudly think of, well, we're not like that here in America. But when I came back to America, I saw a lot of the similarities, and I saw us sliding towards the state that they were in, only on a bigger scale and a more magnificent one. And one of the things that I see is people's reaction to 9/11. There was a massacre in Uzbekistan when I was there, and their own government was lying about what really happened. And if I mentioned it, people would get nervous and want me to be quiet, or they'd get mad. And so, I see this on the scale with 9/11 too, and it's that neurosis that is feeding what we're seeing here. So I don't believe, America to me is exactly what you said, Pam. It's constitutional protections from tyranny, and I see that being eradicated. And once that's gone, America is gone. And so we have to get at the root of this. We need to expose this lie for what it is and restore freedom, restore the freedom to challenge authorities and the freedom to acknowledge reality back to the people again, so they can be empowered and bring us into the 21st century further on a better foot. So that's my own humble opinion.
I want to agree with you. The second part of that question, yes, exposing 9/11 for the crime that it really was is key. It's key to getting our country back.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we are out of time. I want to thank Dave, Pam, and Rick for coming on here on short notice. This is 9/11 Freefall, folks. Remember, you can listen to us every week on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. This is Andy Steele saying goodbye, good luck, and have a great week.